Hello everyone and welcome to this video demonstration for Vo and id Launcher. What I'm going to do today is show you a typical setup in Ableton and also give a demonstration of the sorts of things that are possible while using it. First, let's go ahead and get the two objects necessary in order to use the setup. There are two objects, as you know. There's Vo Launcher and id Launcher. Vo Launcher lives on its own MIDI track and it handles the routing and voice allocation to the other id Launcher objects that you can have on your live set. So let's start by bringing that object in. Again, you can see I've got a blank MIDI track here. Let's just go up to the search bar and type VO underscore and bring that in. And I'll just give you a run through of the parameters that we have here. This turns it on and off. This enables or disables the MIDI bus that sends audio to the other devices. Here, you choose how many voices you're going to have launching clips. And in this project, I've got 6 different instrument tracks set up. So what I'll do is I'll put 6 into the voices parameter. And this will just know how many voices to manage. The current voice shows which voice is being launched. Right now, it's not important to us. The voice allocation behavior here, we've got 2 options. There's either round or random. In round, that's a round robin style where it will just start with 1, then launch 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and then go back to 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. If you press multiple MIDI keys on this track to launch different devices, let's say I do 2 MIDI keys, it'll launch 1 and 2, and then it'll go 3, 4, 5, 6, etc., etc. We'll see some of that in action. In random, it'll just randomly choose which voice to allocate to. For right now, let's just leave it on round. MIDI through, you would enable this if you had other MIDI effects or instruments on this track that you also wanted the MIDI to pass through. Without that on, it basically gates it. We'll see, we've got MIDI coming in. Oops. Ignore that for the time being. We drop this down to 1. There's nothing on this track yet, so nothing will come through. But you can see I've got MIDI coming in, but not out. If I turn through on, it passes through. Reset, what that does is it will go back to a 0, which means that on round robin style, it will start at voice 1 on the next launch. So if you are done and you want to make sure that it starts with a particular instrument, then you can reset that and it'll bring you back. So this again just handles sending audio or sending these quote unquote launch messages out to the other id Launcher devices. So let's go ahead and get that set up on a different track to receive these launch messages, and then we can go through the parameters there. So here I've got a piano track. You can just believe me that that's set up to a contact on a piano sound. And all of these MIDI clips are just different material that I've sort of put together here. I'll show you a little bit more of that when we get playing. But what we want to do in order to control that content is to bring in id Launcher. And so we'll drop that here at the beginning of our patch. Now, as it stands, everything is blank, but what we'll do is we'll set this up to match the instrument that we have here. So there are different things here to look at. There's a global range and then there's an instrument range. And we'll control all of that through here. There's 3 different panels. This controls the global behavior of the object, the max patch, the max for live patch, I should say. This center console is, or this panel, is where you control all the instrument parameters and the global ranges. This is what generates transposition for the different material, and here we have the option to control what type of transposition we want. And then this handles launching of clips and the way by which that is chosen. And then here we also have some additional controls to stop. It's the same as having the stop button here, the clip stop button on the track pressed. That's just for ease of access. And also record if you decide you want to record something onto the track as you're going. You can do that too. So starting kind of top to bottom, left to right here, let's go through these parameters and show you what everything does. The MIDI bus, turn this on or off in order to receive these launch messages, again, coming from the Vo launcher object. We'll turn that on there, and we select a bus to receive that on. This will correspond to one of the voices that are established here. So this is the first instrument in the list, so we'll leave it as 1. And here is a feature where when you have multiple instantiations of this patch, you can control all of them by controlling the parameters on this one object. We have the option to make it independent, a master, or a slave. And for right now, since we have an ensemble, I'm going to go ahead and make this one the master. And any changes that are made to global parameters here, like global range here or here, transposition or launching actions, this will change on all of the devices that we have set up on different tracks, and I'll show you that here in a second. So that's that control. And here, in order for any of the transposition to happen, we want to map this object to a pitch MIDI effect object in Ableton. So let's go ahead and hop over to MIDI effects, pitch, and let's drop that here. And what we do is map this to that. And now the transposition that's generated based on the instrument in the global range will then get mapped to the pitch here and do it in relation to middle C 60. Okay, moving on to the middle panel here. This is a piano instrument, so the easiest thing to do to set the instrument range, again, there's two options here. So there's global range, which is also this slider, global range, which is this slider, and then the custom instrument range, which is controlled here or here. And since this is a default instrument, piano that is, it's established, I can go ahead and do the drop down. These are all of the available standard instruments that I have in there thus far. When you hit piano, it automatically will map out the range of the piano onto the global range, or underneath the global range, I should say. But you see, if we were to choose a violin, the range would thus be limited to the G below middle C and up to a standard range here. And as you control the global range, you can see that it maps onto the instrument range. You can exceed it, or you can go below it, above or below. And that's fine, because when this is relating to different instruments, maybe you've got a bass clarinet down here, and so you want the global range to accommodate that instrument, but it'll also overlap some of the range for whatever instrument set up here. So again, this is a piano. I'm going to leave it on piano. There is some control here for a custom ranged instrument, which we can manually do, high and low. And when you're going to want to consider this is when it's either not a typical instrument, in which case you can establish whatever range you want there, but also you want to keep the highs and the lows within a range where it can accommodate wherever your MIDI material goes. So if just for example here, I think this actually is my highest or my largest range intervallically MIDI clip. And here we just cover 4 semitones, which is not a big deal. But if I choose my piano and a 103 gets launched, which corresponds to the highest note on the piano up here, then it will actually go above the available notes on the instrument. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the custom range and I'm going to make that 100, or 99. We'll do the trick, and that custom high will allow me to go, it can randomly produce a transposition up to 99, but it will allow room for this little flourish to happen, occupying the highest notes of the piano. So that's just something to take in consideration when you're playing with these ranges. The global range basically it's something that's in use when you're using the device as a master, and you've got different instruments with different ranges. But here you can control the total available range that you want for all of your instruments And then underlaid on top of that, or underlaid under that, is the instrument ranges and what is available on the instrument and also made available via the global range will be where the transpositions are generated. And then that will again change the pitch, and that will that the pitch on the MIDI effect, that's creating transposed material coming out of the MIDI clips. We'll look at that in action in a little bit more detail in just a sec, but let's just get through the rest of these. We've got default instrument ranges, custom range, which you'll want to use to accommodate your MIDI material, the global range, which we'll use as we start improvising through the material. And then we have different ways of generating the transposition. It can either be random, which means that it'll generate a random number within this section of your instrument that has both that's within the global and the instrument ranges here. Let's take a look at a smaller ranged instrument so we can just see that in action. If this is my global range here, correlating to all of the instruments, on this particular id launcher, it would only randomly generate a number at 55 because that's the lowest number that's there, and it will always launch something, but when it's at the lowest range, it'll always just launch the lowest number available on the instrument. Now, if I've got something like this, where my high is 61, in that case, a random number generated between 55 and 61 will be generated and adjusted to transpose the material from the clips into that range. So that's random, or we have the option for drunk walk, which will randomly generate a number, but within the step size that you establish here. And so it will drunk walk up and down through the range that you've established, but never leaping greater than the step size we have here. I like to set this on something like 7, so we've got half an octave jump possible, but it's not jumping anywhere too far. Now, at certain times, you do want your material jumping all over the place, in which case you can do something like an octave or 2 octaves or even more. It totally depends on the material you're using and how you want to do it. For right now, let's leave it, say, an octave. Then for the launch controls, this allows users to choose what track to launch the material on. It defaults to this track, which means the track that this is living on. And what happens is it will make quote unquote mental note of all of the clips that are available on that track. And when a launch message comes through, it'll generate a transposition within the range of that instrument, and then it'll launch one of these clips based on the clip launch action that we have set here. It can be random, drunk, again, so very similar, or we can have forward and backwards, which means it'll go straight through ascending or descending order through the clips. If you have drunk established, then you can control the step size here. For any of the others, it makes this inactive because it's just not a parameter that's being used. Okay, so that's all of the parameters there. Just to expedite the process, I've already set up these other tracks, and we can see that the instrument is set for the instrument that we have, and the global range stays the same on all of these devices. As I move it, let's just do this for the sake of clarity. You'll see that the global range that I've established overlaps the instrument ranges of all these different instruments based on their own range, right? So anything will launch within the instrument range, but it'll always be within the global range that you've established here. So if I want the whole thing, this brings up an important note. This is not updating the instrument because I'm on the flute instrument, which is automatically turned to slave since I made this master. Whenever you create a device and you set it to master, it will automatically change all of the other ones to slave mode. If I change this to independent, you'll see that everything is changed to an independent, meaning it can have its a different global range for each instrument. So that's something to keep in mind. If you start changing a parameter and it's not doing anything, it's because it's probably on slave. So I'm going to move this back to master, which will automatically make all of these slave devices. And when I update the parameters, the global parameters, I can do it here or there. It will automatically update those on the instruments. Okay. So I've got this all set up. Each one on a track. We've got a launcher linked to a pitch MIDI effect, and they're all set to this track, meaning it'll all launch all the clips on this track. So let's just take a quick look at the track and how I've got that set up. I have all of my material that I've pre-composed, these like little motivic segments, and I've developed a bunch of different iterations of them. Very simple. Everything's chromatic, up and down, down and up, different pacing of that, different polyrhythms. You can see it does the gesture, but whenever it finishes a beat, it just stops on it. Some longer ones, up and down, straight up, straight down, etc., etc. So these are just basically like motivic developments that I've sort of come up with for this particular section. I've loaded them all in. Now, if I had a segment where it was motivic development starting from a seed and getting more and more complex, then what I could do is I could have my device set to launch forward, and it will follow that motivic development, but spread out throughout the voices. For right now, I'm going to leave it on random because it is kind of actually random. And let's go back to voice allocator. I'm remembering that I still have this set to one voice. I'm going to make this 6 voices. That way it knows and will launch to all of the individual tracks that we have here. And let's go back. Well, I seem to have lost my mouse. Let's pause for a second and I will try to get my mouse back. That way I can show you the rest and we'll go from there. Okay, I've got my mouse back. Sorry about that, but we are ready to rock again. So anyway, voice allocation set to 6 voices. We're starting at 0. We've got round robin behavior and MIDI's not going through. On all of these, MIDI buses are on. You can see that I have them all set to 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. And what that means is when I press, I've got this record enabled, so all my MIDI is coming in through here. I'm just going to use my computer keyboard, but when any MIDI node is received here, it launches, or it sends a launch message through the MIDI bus, the current MIDI bus, to this device, which is receives on this. It will randomly generate a note within the range that's allowable on that instrument based on whatever you have set here. And then it will launch one of the clips on this device and we'll hear some of the material. So that was one key press. Now when I press it again, since we have round robin selected for the voice allocator, we're going to hop to voice 2 and we'll launch a random clip on this track. Now, if I keep playing MIDI notes, I can control dynamically the texture of the ensemble and kind of just compose out, like improvise through this material. And since I have this set as my master device, I can also control dynamically the range that everything occurs on. If I set it to like one number, everything's going to launch with that transposition. So you can kind of get an idea of how that works. And again, you have different random number generating options. We can do something totally random. If we've got the global range spanning the entire segment, that it'll just be totally random notes within instrument ranges. So that's the general setup. Now, if you want to control these all individually, just change it to independent and everything will be an independent object. A couple words, additional words, things to consider while you're doing this. The global launch quantization is very important here. If we want everything to only start and end at the bar or the beat or whatever, we can select that. This will be really important depending on your material. I actually should be launching everything probably at the quarter note, since I've got some, 30-second notes, tuplets, like 5/4 tuplets here. I probably, in order to make notation possible, want to have it set at something that is notatable without too much strain. You can always adjust things after. But this allows you to sort of improvise through material and kind of get it into your ear. Now, if you get to the point where you're starting to like what you're coming up with, like let's say that we really like a segment where everything's right in the middle of everyone's range, and I want to record some improvisations with me messing around there. What I can do is I can create another set of blank MIDI tracks, one that represents each of the instruments we have. We can set MIDI from the instruments there. And if I've got them all record enabled, I can select a clip, hit record on here. And as I play through here, that will all get recorded in. And you can see we start getting all of it. Or we can record it to the session. Sorry, the arrangement. Now if we hop over to the session, it's recording all of that. Oh, I had some stuff recorded earlier, but you can see it's overwriting that. This is what was just performed. So that's the gist. If you have any questions, go to the documentation. Everything's described in detail. Also, you can hover over every parameter, and we've got info help view just as a refresher as you're getting through and kind of learning the details of the instrument. That's that. A couple things to look forward to is an audio-only device. Right now, this can only live as a MIDI device on MIDI tracks, launching MIDI clips, but I'm creating one that will work for audio clips as well. And also, this is a very particular setup, just as a demonstration, but there are many other variants of this setup that can be used to assist you in composition. But really, this is made as a way of dynamically launching MIDI clips that you've already established in order to sort of improvise through material and different textures. So I hope you like it. And if you have any questions, feel free to email me. My info is at the bottom of the PDF for the documentation. Thanks and enjoy.